Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this week's Speak Up, Stand Out with Women in Recruitment. Today, I've got the absolute pleasure of interviewing and talking to Nicky Acuna Ocana from Ambition Recruitment. Nicky is going to be talking to us today about how to be authentic in the workplace and how by doing so you can impact the culture in your business. And I think this is a topic that many of us will relate to, Nicky. I know for me, for sure, this is a conversation I've had with many a female, yourself included, over a glass of wine. And I'm really interested to hear what you're going to share with us today. And Nicky, I've only known you for about a year, but you've always struck me as being very authentic. You're warm, you're kind, you're genuine, but you're human, yet you're really strong and you're very smart. And I can tell why you've been successful at work. So being able to hear from you today how you created that balance of retaining those human elements, which are so important, yet risen to a very successful position, I think is going to be really insightful for a lot of us. So thank you for joining us, and I will pass over to you and ask our audience please to put any questions you might have to Nicky through on the chat box. I'll be looking at the chat box as Nicky's speaking, and as questions come in, if they're appropriate, I'll field them to her during the conversation, and if not, we'll try and cover them off at the end. But yes, please pop them through on the chat box. So over to you, Nicky.
Well, thanks for that introduction, Natasha. That's amazing. And I have to say, you're one of my inspirational women. And if only you'd been a role model around when I started my career, I think it would have made things a bit smoother. So I thought it'd probably good just to give you a bit of an update background of my career to date, and then to talk more around the cultural elements of something that we're trying to create at Ambition as well. So I started my career in retail management. So post university, I joined the Harrods graduate trainee scheme and had some fantastic training there, which was very much theory based. And then I went out onto the sales floor with my shiny management badge and realised how different management is in practice. And I was managing a lot of multi-generational teams, so they definitely taught me how to manage by managing upwards, which was an interesting time. I loved my time there, worked my way up to senior manager, and then realised that I wanted to really earn some serious money, which you cannot do in retail. For those of you that have worked in retail, it's very challenging to be able to do that. And someone told me about this strange career called recruitment, which they explained as being a career that the harder you work, the more you could get out of it, that you could be as determined as possible and build this career for yourself. And that was regardless of who you were, where you were from, your background, and also your gender. So I went for some interviews and decided to join Baden Clarke, which was the first recruitment company I worked for, and took a really big cut in pay to do that, and also took a big step back in my career from senior manager to consultant. So we'll talk through this about sometimes these treading water periods of time or decisions you make to help further your career. This was definitely one for me. So joined Baden Clarke and got some really great training there. Interestingly enough, on my first day of joining the company, I walked in wearing a trouser suit and was told by my manager that girls didn't wear trousers for work, they wore skirts. So that was definitely something that I disagreed with and made my feelings quite well known about that. I was successful at Baden Clarke and worked my way back up into a management role, and decided I wanted to become a main board director by the age of 30. And so that was something that I was very focused on achieving. Recruitment was just perfect for me because of the target-driven environment. It's something that it really floats my boat, being able to achieve targets and also build relationships with candidates and clients and make lots of money. So all those boxes were ticked. I was then approached by one of the directors at Baden Clarke who asked me to set up a new brand that he was asked to develop underneath the MPS Group banner. So again, this wasn't the trajectory that I thought my career was going to take. So it was something completely different. And it was an amazing opportunity to set up a company from scratch, which was even coming up with the company name. It was absolutely everything. A great learning curve for me. After a few months, the director left, so I was then left running a company, which, you know, I didn't have a clue what I was doing. And, you know, looking at these moments in time when you do think hindsight is a wonderful thing, this would have been an ideal opportunity for me to have my own mentor to help me through this, which I didn't have. So I made lots of mistakes, which luckily one of my mantras is to learn by your mistakes. So I made lots of mistakes and learnt the hard way about how to make a recruitment company successful. During this period of time, I had my first son, Jude, who was born prematurely and was quite a poorly baby. So I had what we then took as maternity leave, Natasha, which wasn't very long, was it? I had a few months off work and back in the office. And then I subsequently had my second child, Evie, who was also premature and quite a poorly baby. And unfortunately, at the time, I had a junior management team working for me, and they were unable to keep the company going when I was on mat leave. So my boss at the time asked me to come back early from mat leave to get the company back up and running. And this was a really, really tough time for me. I look back through my career, and I had two babies at home that were both poorly. I just found out that my father had terminal cancer and hadn't been given long to live. And also there was a company that was underperforming that I felt really strongly about. I was very passionate about making it a success. So I was getting pulled in lots of different directions and, you know, felt like I wasn't doing a good job of any of them. And so, again, this would have been an ideal time for me to have reached out and spoken to a mentor or a role model, or just got some practical advice about how to deal with this. The result was that the company I was running, it was going to be absorbed back into the bigger group, and it was an opportunity for me to go back into the group. And I decided that that wasn't what I wanted to do, and I decided that the best thing for me would be to leave and start a different company with a more junior role. So I then joined Ambition as an associate director and made the conscious decision that I was going to tread water for a few years to try and get everything balanced and really start to enjoy what I was doing again, because I absolutely love recruitment, and I wanted to make sure that I got that love and enjoyment back. So I joined Ambition on the 2nd of January 2008, and for those of you that have been in recruitment or even in the working world for a long period of time, you'll know that was when we had the GFC, and that was definitely a time when I thought, wow, this is hard on people, this is hard on careers. You know, I will never have to go through anything like this in my career again, thank God. And here we are in a global pandemic, and this is so much worse than anything any of us have been through. But started to develop my career at Ambition. My kids started to get older, and I felt again that I was ready to rebuild my career. And I was very passionate about becoming a managing director, because the experiences that I'd faced in my recruitment career, where I didn't feel that there was a supportive environment, I didn't feel that the culture was good enough, I didn't feel that people were doing the right things that should be happening, and I really wanted to be able to impact and affect change. So very luckily, I managed to build my career at Ambition, and I was asked to take over as managing director in 2016. And we have been building on our professional services, the business service into professional services way of working and specialism for a few years. Got an amazing management team and consulting team, and I think hopefully, Natasha, if you spoke to any of them, they would say that the culture is really positive and inclusive and open, and you know, we really do want to make it somewhere special to work, and I feel it's somewhere special. Hope that's a good thing, obviously, because I'm the MD, but I do think we've got a very special company.
Are any of your people on the call today?
I don't know. Let's see if you get any questions or comments.
Just give any of them put a thumbs up for you. It's interesting what you talk about there, Nicky, though there's some synergies you and I haven't perhaps yet discovered about each other, but like you, I had my first child, and my number 2 at the time turned up a week after I'd had my son, knocked on the front door and said, actually, I've decided I'm going to resign.
Oh my God, no.
Thank you. And we did. Was back very quickly after child number one, and had to throw myself back into it. So maybe that was one of the tough lessons that got us from. But it's the whole trouser suit piece is interesting as well, because I don't think I ever had anybody comment on me wearing trouser suits, which I did do a lot. But what I did notice was once I stopped wearing trouser suits and actually started to wear dresses, that people changed towards me a bit. And I think I changed. I think I softened up a bit when I took off the pinstripe trouser suits. And that was quite a significant turning point for me, actually, in terms of that step between, being a bit of a robot versus starting to morph into being who I was. So there was just two interesting things you said there. I resonated.
I think it's interesting. I know I can remember, throughout the first part of my my recruitment career, all I wore were clothes that would actually fit in with everybody else. And most of the people at the time, particularly in senior management roles, were male. So it tended to be black suits, pinstripes, navy suits. And I don't know why, because you want to morph in, where actually the biggest thing is to be able to stand out, particularly in the world of recruitment. And as you say, when I started to recognise and realise that what made me happy wasn't trying to fit in, but was being true to myself, I do wear lots of dresses.
Yeah, but it's what you say. I think it's probably as well, because when we started, God, it was for me 30 odd years ago now, I don't think there were many women around to look at, to take your role modelling from or your inspiration from. So all we could see were the men, wasn't it, in their pinstripe suits. But just to give you a little bit of confidence, Siobhan Courtney's just said, actually, you were pretty brilliant when she worked with you.
Thanks, Siobhan.
You can carry on, Nicky. You're authentic. So keep going. Your story's obviously true. So what happened next? Where did you get to in the next stage of your journey?
So I think when I was thinking a lot about this actually earlier on today, about when I decided that the culture piece was going to be so important for who I wanted to work for and reasons why I wanted to work for those people. And it took me back to a memory that I had at Ambition, and I'd been there a couple of years, and one of the founders was over from Australia, and my sister at the time was very poorly. She had diabetic related complications, and she was in hospital and really poorly. And I just happened to be walking in the lift one morning, and Paul was in the lift, the founder, and she'd phoned me, and she sounded absolutely awful. And she said to me, I'm not feeling great. She'd been put on a cancer ward because there weren't enough beds in the ward she was supposed to be in. And she said, they've just tried to give me an injection or insulin, and if they'd given me that much, they would have put me into a coma, and I'm just scared, I don't know what to do. And I was saying to her, don't worry, I'll phone the hospital now and I'll come straight after work and come and see you. She was at a hospital in Kent. And we said goodbye, went up in the lift, and Paul said to me, I'm really sorry, Nicky, I wasn't listening to your call. Is everything okay? And I said, well, actually, no, and just, explain the situation. And he said to me, well, what are you doing? What are you doing here? And I said, we've got busy day meetings. And he said to me, Nicky, work will be here tomorrow. This has got to take priority. Go to your sister now. And, just someone saying that that's okay speaks more than any kind of words could ever, because, you are getting that belief and support that this is the company, this is how they want to be, and this is the reality. People have got lives, and we want to make sure that we can be there for the good and the bad times in people's own personal journeys. So I think for me, and when I was looking at how to develop culture and make sure that we had an inclusive scheme at Ambition, all of these things feed in, and your own personal experiences feed in constantly, don't they, about how you want to try and adapt and change and improve culture.
And do you think that as a female, it was slightly more intuitive for you than perhaps if you'd been a male? Because it is interesting when you look at, and I don't want to generalize because it's not true in all instances, but female-led businesses often tend to be more diverse. They tend to be more aware and more mindful of some of the issues around inclusion. Do you feel it's helped you being a woman?
I think yes, definitely. But I also think that it's sometimes that you don't reach out enough to men to even have those conversations, to ask those questions. And I know that, you know, my management team and directors at Ambition really care about diversity and inclusion, and one of my directors, Matt, is actually leading a program around this to see how he can build more D&I into our client base as well. And I think, you know, looking back on which is hindsight, as we know, is a wonderful thing. Yeah, looking back on my journey, I made it harder on myself than I needed to. I think as a female, you do set yourself a lot higher expectations around what you should be doing and what you can and can't do. And, you know, I took a lot of the pressure on my shoulders when I could have easily reached out to other people. And, you know, a lot of my peers at the time were men. I am sure if I'd had conversations with those men at the time, they would have helped me or would have been able to come up with, you know, some suggestions and ideas. But I almost felt that by reaching out, asking for help, it was a sign of weakness. I recognise now that that's probably one of the biggest strengths that you can ever have, is to ask for help, you know, admit some kind of vulnerability. But at the time, it felt that was, to me, a more female behaviour. And so I have definitely changed my thinking process around that.
I think that's interesting too, because I certainly feel, and actually this isn't a necessarily gender related issue. I think because our industry has tended to have been so target driven, and at times perhaps in the past the human element, as you talked about with your sister, might have been overlooked. You were lucky to have a boss that acknowledged and recognised that we are still human. But I found actually that, as you say, asking for help, showing vulnerability, sometimes the people you ask for help from don't always know how best to help you because they might never have been in that situation before. But actually, by you reaching out and asking, even if they don't handle your scenario terribly well, you've kind of given them an opportunity to then allow themselves to think next time how they would handle that situation. And so even if you are a bit of the icebreaker, that piece, it's almost, I suppose, what reverse mentoring does, isn't it? It helps educate people around the experiences of others around them and how best to help them. So I know, for example, sitting in meetings quite often, I used to feel that I would say something and no one would acknowledge it, and then 10 minutes later a man would say the same thing and everyone would jump on it like it was the most revolutionary thing ever. And I'd be sitting there saying, yeah, but I just said that 10 minutes ago. And it got to the point where I said something to one of the people that was normally around the table with me, and you know, they were, oh yeah, you're right, that does happen. And they hadn't really twigged. And I said to them, well, actually, could you do me a favour, and next time that happens, could you say something along the lines of, well, to whoever has just raised this point, that sounds very similar to what Natasha said 10 minutes ago. What's different, or something to sort of acknowledge me and my contribution. And that individual wouldn't have known if I hadn't have gone and said to them, can you help? So that
it's so important, isn't it? Yeah, because I think a lot of the time we do assume a second guess, and you know, if you actually just speak to people and ask them what they're thinking or ask them for help, people are really happy to help all the time. And you know, the mentoring piece I think is incredible. You mentioned reverse mentoring there as well, but I remember a few years ago in my career when I was having some mentoring from our HRD at the time. So giving a shout out to Omar, who I thought was a really great mentor for me. And we were talking about strengths and weaknesses, and I've always grown up being told, make your weaknesses stronger, make your weaknesses stronger all the time. And he said to me, why are you trying to do that? You know, your strengths are things that you tend to be good at, you enjoy. And if you concentrated on making those strengths even better, you'd be unstoppable. And you build your team around you so that your areas of weakness, normally there's someone else that's got that as a strength. what do you think you could all be like if you're all just really pushing out your own strengths? What kind of collaboration and unit would you become? And it was almost, you know, that light bulb moment when you just go, oh, yes, why am I not doing that? And I can quite honestly say that really changed the way that I saw, you know, what I was trying to do and the team that I was trying to create. And it started to impact, I would say, you know, not only my personal career goals, but also able to take my division and therefore the company forward as well.
So, I mean, I think I absolutely agree with you. I think for years we spent so long focusing on what we weren't good at, and the shift is, people are starting, I think, to recognise now, actually, it's far better to be strong at a few things than okay at a number.
Yeah, yeah.
Quite clearly, if we were all good at everything, then, you know, the world wouldn't work so well. But and did you find that once you, actually no, let me start that question again. How did you identify your strengths? Because once you know them, you can operate more truly to yourself, can't you? More authentic. Yeah. How did you go about working out what your strengths were?
I think it was, as soon as you start thinking about it, it's quite obvious, isn't it? You know, you look at what do you enjoy doing, is always a big thing, and what if you had the best results from your behaviours or from the way of working and what you've been doing, so you can quite quickly hone in. And then it was also asking other people, so again it's showing a bit of vulnerability and going to people and saying, I'm trying to work out here, you know, what the best bits are and what the areas are that I'm probably not as strong as, so I want to concentrate on these good bits. And people will give you advice and feedback. You know, a lot of my management, my team, particularly my directors, love giving feedback, which is great. And you know, they challenge me, and I think that's great to have an environment where you can be able to challenge each other. But again, you can only get to that if you've got trust and also if you open yourself up to a little bit of vulnerability. Otherwise, you're not willing to take that off other people, are you?
No, that's right. And I don't know how you felt, but it did take me a long time to work out. You know, we all talk about fear of being found out and imposter syndrome. And it took me ages, and I mean probably last few years, to really work out why I was sat round the table, and to draw confidence actually from the fact that I was sat around the table for a reason, and I now understood what that reason was in terms of my skills and what I contributed to the team, and acknowledging actually that probably what I did bring to the table was different to what a lot of the others brought to the table, and I took huge amounts of strength from that in terms of them feeling I could turn up to work being me and not worry about all those other things I couldn't do that some of the guys were better at. Have you experienced similar?
I think back in my career, yes. I think, you know, definitely when I'd be sat around a table and I was the only female, as you were, in these situations, and you know, your opinion and your thought process is just different sometimes, particularly if you're in a boardroom situation. You know, you've got a lot of strong personalities. You know, you've got a lot of very strong male personalities that are used to getting themselves heard and pushing their thoughts and feelings forward. So I think for me, if I feel passionate about something, there's no stopping me. You know, I'm like a train until I, you know, get to where I want to go. But I think it also taught me to let other things go. So sometimes I felt like I was getting to the stage where I was just trying to get my voice heard in this situation around with all of these chaps, very strong opinions about everything. And I think I got to the stage where I recognise I don't need to have strong opinions about everything. I only, if it's something I care about and I'm passionate about, then yes, I do. But other bits, you know, you let those go a little bit. And, you know, again, it's that being true to yourself. And at the start, I was definitely emulating male behaviours in those meetings. And, you know, when I recognised that I wasn't being true to myself by doing that, and I felt more comfortable doing it, then again, I think people started to listen to me a bit more, because it wasn't just me trying to get myself heard over a number of other people. Yeah.
And in terms of being a mum and going through that challenging journey of working, running a business, did that change you at all?
I don't see how it can't change you. I really don't. And I think, you know, Natasha, you've brought your children up as well, and the guilt that you feel, even though you know you don't need to feel guilt, because you know this is a choice in life that you're doing, but you feel guilt around not being present at some of the children's activities, and if you are, then you're not present sometimes at the work piece, and trying to balance all of that off was at the start, particularly when I was in a more male dominated environment, it was really tough. And then I recognized again that this wasn't making me happy. So I was in a toxic culture. And the only thing you can do is remove yourself out of that culture and find a culture that is you're happier with and more comfortable with. And, you know, we're in a situation now, hopefully at Ambition, and people feel this, we're not just saying it, that, you know, I feel completely comfortable going to one of my child's events and saying to work, you know, I'm not going to be contactable for the next hour. And I feel completely comfortable saying to the kids, I'm doing a call now for the next hour, so you know, can you know, don't interrupt. So you've got it's a really tough balance to make though, but I do think it helps once you're as a woman, you do tend to have more of an understanding mindset, and that's not saying that men don't have that, I'm not saying that at all, but you just come from a different angle, I think, in a different place, and you are able to offer that to both male and females who work for you in your organisation.
And Nicky, with the audience that are listening, just thinking of the best way to phrase this, the culture that exists within an organisation is obviously made up by all of the individuals that work in it. There's not one person that defines the culture, it's everybody that works there that is ultimately responsible for the culture. So as we're talking about authentism and how to retain that in the workplace, for the people that are on the call, what thoughts have you got around how they can make a difference, not just to themselves, but to the environment, by being true to who they are when they're in the workplace?
Well, I think you've got to, they have to feel that that's the reality, don't they? And, you know, I've been doing a lot of work around diversity and inclusion at the moment, and, you know, diversity is quite one of those boxes that everyone seems to be wanting to tick at the moment, and you know that's actually part of the problem, but it's more about the inclusive environment. So if you make your environment, as you say, if each individual is making their environment true to themselves and part of who they are, then it permeates everyone and everything. So, you know, I'm thinking around, obviously we're all working from home at the moment, but normally when we're in the office environment, you know, we have got such a wide mix of people. It's fantastic. And it's only through having such a wide mix of people that are so different that you do get true inclusion in a workplace. And you know, it's difficult in recruitment. You know, a lot of recruitment companies, when I was growing up, when you were growing up, it was all around this hard drinking culture. You know, it's very, very different. And you know, there's still an element of, in sales, there is still that element there, and you know, that's great and that's fun, and we all like going out and enjoying ourselves. But it's also about recognizing that that's not how what everyone likes to do, and how do we make sure that we are including people and what their enjoyment factors are. So we do lots of different things. You know, we do, you know, even very small things, like on Valentine's Day, we do a good deed. Everyone pulls a name out of the hat and you do something nice for somebody, whether it's making them a cup of tea or decorating the whole area with balloons and, you know, whatever. But it's just making lots of different ways of allowing people to express themselves and to feel comfortable doing that. And hopefully, you know, if someone for any reason is feeling uncomfortable about something, that they either can tell their manager or somebody around them who would also be able to then communicate this and stop any kind of behaviour that isn't acceptable. But you're right, I think it's everybody's part to play in this, isn't it? It's from bottom up, top down, you know, you name it.
And sometimes it takes one brave person, doesn't it, to, if you like, could start the butterfly effect, which yes. And sometimes it's not always the obvious. I mean, you like to think that the leaders of organisations like yourself are the ones that will take responsibility for setting that tone, because ultimately it does start from the top, doesn't it? And you role modelling the culture that you want to exist is probably the most important factor, isn't it?
But I think that's a really good point as well around role modelling. And, you know, as you mentioned, there weren't the role models there for us as we were coming through the ranks. But also, I think you have to be careful as a role model because, you know, throughout my career, I probably haven't always been as vocal about my vulnerabilities and the times in my life where I've found it so incredibly challenging and the reasons why. And, you know, so someone looking at you or a me might go, wow, you know, they've made it to the top of the tree. They've got this, you know, perfect life, 2.1 kids and 2 cats, and you know this. I'm never going to be able to achieve that because I have all of this stuff going on in my personal life. But you know, if you don't share some of those vulnerabilities and people don't recognize and understand that you know you're not sat at the top of your tree all shiny, you've had lots of lumps and bumps on the way, and you know, and lots of mistakes. And I think that's really important for people like you and I and other people in our industry.
Yeah, and it's a really good point actually, because I've certainly learnt over my career that my life has not been void of lumps and bumps. I've had plenty of them. And actually, when I have shared my lumps and bumps with others, I've discovered everyone else has got lumps and bumps too. And in a way, I think it's quite reassuring to realise that you're not the only one that has to tackle things in their outside life, and most people have got a level of stuff that they're having to juggle and tackle at the same time as their careers. And I think if you can also start to realize that that is just life, you then become a bit more accepting, don't you, of some of the things that are thrown at you, and you're maybe stronger in dealing with them because you don't feel like you're suffering on your own. This is actually just this is life, and life does throw a number of things at you.
And I think it's important as well that when things are happening in your personal life, sometimes it is great just to be able to throw yourself into work, because it can be an absolute saviour, can't it, for you? And at the moment it's a little more challenging because everybody is in their own work environments, normally in their own house. So it's about how you balance that off to make sure that you're able to continue in a positive mindset.
I'm just going to remind people to send any questions that you'd like to put to Nicky before we do finish today. So please do send anything else through that you'd like asked of Nicky. And yeah, just coming back to that point with regards to working from home and not being in the office, do you feel it's harder for your true self and your authenticism to be portrayed over remote technology? I mean, how do we tackle that, do you think, going forward?
Yeah, I think it's definitely difficult. I think that particularly the start of the pandemic, I probably wasn't that visual with our employees because I was doing so much stuff with the banks and with the finance team, and you know, trying to work lots of different things out and spending time with the directors, but not necessarily with the teams. But then again, that's when you need that strong management team to be able to do that for you. So, you know, I'm very lucky because I've got 2 very strong directors and I've got strong managers. So I said to them all, you guys need to keep all the day-to-day stuff going and keep people's hearts and minds, because to me, it's really, hearts and minds is really important to me. And, you know, I'm a great believer in trust and loyalty. You know, if someone's loyal to me, I will go to the ends of the earth for them. But I do think it's harder to keep that connection and authenticity, as you say, over a Zoom call, because that's, you know, people do normally engage face to face, and that's how you build stronger relationships. So, you know, it is important to get FaceTime with people. And one of the things I was trying to do over lockdown, when we got out of lockdown, was to go and meet some of the consultants on a one-to-one basis and, you know, grab a bite to eat with them. We've got something that we're doing next Friday where we're going to try and get people together in smaller groups, because you know, you have a group of 6, but it'll be just really good to see some people, and hopefully they can also ask me questions, because I know that they have lots of questions about the business. And you know, does it always feel appropriate contacting me via Zoom or Teams to ask something, whereas if you're in an office or you're around someone, they would always grab me, or in the kitchen you're having a cup of tea, you'd talk about something. So yes, it is more difficult.
Thank you. Is there anything we haven't touched on just before I ask the last couple of questions, Nicky? Is there anything we haven't touched on today that you were planning or hoping to share with us?
I wanted to just really reiterate about how important I feel the mentoring side is, and I know that women in recruitment have a mentoring scheme as well, but it's really important, particularly if you're starting in your career. I think if that was one bit of advice I would pass to people starting in their careers is to really look at somebody, one who's going to be a sponsor for you in your organisation, but look at a mentor. And if you don't know where to start, then I'm sure you can contact Natasha or Women in Recruitment, and they'll be able to put you on the right track. It's really, really will be invaluable in your career.
Thank you. You did the plug for me. That's brilliant. Actually, I mean, you're right. When Women in Recruitment did the survey around, of our members, what were the areas that people felt would make most difference? It was having access to mentors, and that's why we set the mentoring program up, actually, because a lot of people didn't necessarily have access to that in their organisations. So yeah, please do, if anybody doesn't have one and would like to join the programme. As Nicky said, I do think it's absolutely valuable, and as you said as well, we probably didn't really have access to these ourselves in time gone by, and it, like you, I think that is when I started to probably develop myself mentally and mindset wise, was having time with a mentor and somebody that, and actually female mentors at the time, who were just giving me the support I wasn't getting from the male network around me, not for any reason that they didn't want to give it to me. It's just that, you know, the limitations that existed between the experiences that we had. So yeah, I agree. And I think, yeah, taking the opportunity to have access to a mentor is definitely a takeaway from today. In terms of another question, Nicky, is there any part of you or any piece of you that you have found hardest to be authentic about?
That's a good question. Is there? I think I wouldn't say so now. I would say definitely at the start of my career, I would, or when I'd started my family, I would never talk to any of my male peers about my children or mention it. Or, you know, that wouldn't be something as a conversation, or even say they're doing such and such a thing. It just wouldn't come into it, because I would be feeling like they would not be interested in that. So I kind of cut off a major part of my life. So I don't know how authentic you can be if you're holding back part of your personality like that. So you know, that's something I definitely learned, that you know, for me to be authentic, I have to be me, and that includes you know, sharing personal information around my family as well. So I think that's something I learned.
And actually, it's interesting, isn't it, that I think a lot of men would like to do the same and would benefit from doing the same, and perhaps they've suffered from some of the same oppression, if you like, in that way as we as women have. And so it, you know, actually a lot of what we talked about today doesn't just apply to females, does it, in the workforce? It can often to men who feel they have to be a certain way or operate and look a certain way. We've had one comment come through, Nicky, which is quite interesting, that you might want to share your view on. And it's from Annette Thorpe, who says, it's interesting the linguistics and language around what constitutes strong leadership qualities in relation to gender attributes, e.g. talk about strong and competitive being male attributes, and nurturing and empathetic being more female attributes. And Annette's question is, why can't women be both and men? Do you have a
Well, I think that they can, and I think that one of the things that I probably did was not show my female qualities at the start of my journey. And I think most people will have both, and it's about how much you use those and how much you decide to use them. And you'll use them for different scenarios as well. I mean, there'll be times when a situation needs you to probably use more male language, particularly if it's a harder situation, or if you're in or if it's a board meeting and you may want to get something across. And there'll be other times where you may need to use the more female language, if you're, you know, classing it as male and female language, particularly if someone is having something that is happening on a personal level. And it doesn't matter if you're male or female. And I know that language is particularly when you're looking in recruitment terms, it's incredibly important, because even the way that you put job ads out there, they can be classed as, you know, this whole women looking at a job ad and going, oh god, no, I only do 6 out of 10, so that job's not for me, and men going, oh, I do 5 out of 10, that's definitely for me. See, it is important, and I think that it's a really good point.
And I think actually I'd agree with you in that I guess we all have the ability to draw on all of those attributes, and it's actually often our choice, both the men and women, who choose to draw more or less on any one of those. And you know, and there is a lot of social conditioning still, isn't there, that we're fighting, and years of that has shaped or formed perhaps how society works and how we operate. But I would agree with you that it's in everybody, and it's about how the willingness of people to display those attributes or to use them in the right way at the right time, yeah, as you say. And maybe what we're doing through the work we're doing is trying to, as you say, Annette, trying to encourage people to realise it's okay for a female to be strong and it's okay for a man to be empathetic. You know, yeah. So actually what we're asking for, I think, is, you know, at the right time and in the right place, allow us to be these things without judgment or without, you know, putting us into a box and labelling us a certain way.
Yeah. And I don't think be a leader without using both. You know, yeah, whether you're a male or a female leader, I do think you need to pull on both sets of attributes as well. So it's really important.
Agreed. Well, Nicky, thank you. And let's come back to say absolutely agree. Thank you, and thanks for such an interesting
really good point, Annette.
Nicky, thank you. I've loved chatting to you again. I always do. I know there'll probably be lots of people listening on the call thinking I'd like to go and work for her now. So
contact me. Come and work for Ambition. I'll do a sales pitch now.
Certainly come across as the kind of person that I'd like to work for. So thank you for sharing all your top tips. You're amazing.
Well done, Samaya.
So yeah, lots of people I'm sure will be very grateful for what you've shared with us today, Nicky, and people obviously can find you on LinkedIn and read more about you there. And I hope very much to see you again soon, and thank you for joining us today. And we'll be back in time for another Women in Recruitment webinar, so keep watching for what's coming. And Nicky, have a lovely weekend.
You too.
Thank you for hosting again. Yeah, lots of comments coming through saying how you enjoyed the session and you're great. So take that one and have a lovely week.
Thank you very much. Bye everyone.
Happy Friday. Bye.